All right, we're back. It's Family Movie Time Podcast. I'm really excited. We got a good one for everybody today. Willy Wonka, the original from 1971. And I'm your host, Jeff M. Giordano of the Family Movie Time Podcast. Um, if you want to subscribe. If not, that's okay. If you want to donate, I got a PayPal link.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
if you just want to watch and enjoy and sit back with your feet up, that's cool too. Um, I'll let Gerald, my guest, introduce himself. You take it away, Gerald.
What's up, guys? I'm Gerald, close friend of Jeff's. Used to work together. Um, I'm from the Bay Area, from Richmond. I'm a Bay original. Been here all my life. Um, Guess you can say always sunny in California. Um, but yeah, I work in education, work in special education. I currently work at a middle school. Been working in education for like 10 years. Very rewarding job. Some challenges. Get to meet some really cool people. Like I said, I've met Jeff working in the education system. Um, so yeah, I'm also a Reiki practitioner. If anybody who needs any Reiki out there, um, spiritual healing through light touch helps you, rest, restore, and rejuvenate. So yeah, if you need some Reiki, looking to try something else besides, medication, then hit your boy up. I'm the guy. But yeah, I'm excited to be a part of the podcast. Talking about Willy Wonka today, which is a great, I guess we can say, family film. I think we'll dive into that. Um, but yeah, um, I'm excited. So I guess that's a little introduction of myself. Yeah.
Thanks, Gerald. And I'll say Willy Wonka, and this is the Gene Wilder version, just to clarify for everybody.
Yeah, just
I This is
three
one that
different
I
versions.
remember. I remember watching as a kid, teenager, like on VHS, and you know, rewatching it multiple times with friends. But I want to hear your take on it and why you chose it off the hundreds of films that I had on the list. What was it
Oh,
about Willy Wonka that jumped out for
uh,
you?
well, I didn't have the VHS copy as you did, so shout out to that because that's definitely legendary since there are no VHSs around. If you have a VHS, um, you're cool. That's all I have to say. And I know DVDs are going out also, so yeah, no. My mom was a big Gene Wilder fan. Loved Gene Wilder. Um, so I would say I first time seeing Willy Wonka was definitely in the '90s, which it came out way beforehand. But I was born in '91, so I remember my mom just kind of sitting me down and was like, "Oh, you should watch this. Willy Wonka is a really good movie. It talks about candy, and as a kid, you love candy, so you're like, okay, definitely want to tune in." So I watched it. Um, and yeah, it I think had a lot of different themes. Just kind of growing up as a kid, that they kind of showcased in there from, um, just being kind, and happiness and joy, and then just kind of the negativity of the things too, of like greed and power. So a lot of different things in there. But yeah, I was introduced because of my mom. Like I said, I thought it was a good family film, and yeah, I liked it.
What do you think? Are you able to think back when you were a kid? Like, did it scare you? Like, did the tunnel scene scare you? Or how was that like initial or the initial viewings?
Yeah, I would say at first watching like the Oompa Loompas were definitely interesting to me, a little bit scary, just of how they were kind of presented. Um, and I think there was just like with the kids and the certain kind of consequences they paid. for the certain things that they did kind of frightened me a bit. You know, when you're thinking like, oh my gosh, if this actually kind of happened. I think about like the one kid who fell into the chocolate pool and then got sucked up the little thing, and it's like, oh my gosh, like think of just drowning in chocolate. It's thick and everything. So some of the like parts of that, I think, as a kid was a little bit scary. But then again, like all the cool stuff like that, like seeing the chocolate pool and all these like cool candy candies everywhere and how they were kind of presented was just incredible. So
And then as an adult, what do you notice? Like, if you try to remember the last time you saw it, like, did you pick up on different things?
so I probably watched it maybe I would say 3 weeks, maybe a month ago. Just because I had watched the latest version that came out. So I kind of wanted to do, you know, you do the old comparison when they remake something compared to like the original. Um, and I think for me was more of just kind of like the production, right? So like um, I would say what Willy Wonka was done in the late '70s. Um, I'm not too sure of how much CGI they used in that film. But you know, now and you know, times we're using CGI really heavy. So I think just kind of going back and checking out the props and then the costumes. Because Gene Wilder was really flashy, man, very flamboyant in like the original film. And just all the costumes and stuff like that were, you know, really creative and cool. So just kind of going back and realizing, and then um, I love the music in the original, right? You got the Pure Imagination, which is the iconic song, which is a great score. I think Gene Wilder does a really great job of singing that song. And then you have like the Oompa Loompa song, which is great, right? Yeah, funny little dance they do. And you're kind of really intrigued by these little like tiny people, you know, who are doing all this kind of work in this chocolate factory. Um, and compared to like the other ones, because I know in the latest one, they kind of do like the song, but it's not similar. Um, so for me, it was just really checking out like the different kind of like effects, production, like I said, like the costumes. Uh, that's all I can really think about. How about yourself? I know you recently said you were going to check it out.
Yeah. For me, it was like it definitely the texture of the 1971 version. Um, I feel like it hits harder because there isn't like computer graphics. It's just
Mm-hmm.
props and practical effects, you know, or just things they could build or some kind of, you know, costume thing or they painted it a certain way or the room that has everything cut in half. Like they
Mm-hmm.
really cut everything in half. It's not just like one thing's cut in half and then they multiplied it or they added things, you know, in the editing. So I really appreciated, well, my notes. I really appreciated that. And I think as a kid seeing it, um, I think it's more like the spectacle and the music and like
Mm-hmm.
Willy Wonka's personality. He's like kind of weird. You don't really know. He's hard to read and
Mm-hmm.
he's like very unpredictable. And then I think too, like all the different kids' personalities who are trying to get the golden
Mm-hmm.
ticket or who wind up going to, you know, the chocolate factory and they want to win. And they also are like tempted to eat and taste all this stuff. And the fact that Charlie, the kid, the main character, came from like a poor background. I
Mm-hmm.
think seeing that as a younger person I was like, wow, like seeing his living with his grandfather, and then you see the inside of their home.
It's man, like they have one bed, like four people in it.
Yeah.
You can really tell they're going through the real struggle. Definitely at that time. Yeah.
And the music, yeah, the music really is awesome. And then, preparing to do this episode, I was reading like some trivia about the movie and looking up the director and reading about the making of the film. And originally, it wasn't going to be a musical,
Hmm.
but they decided because of The Wizard of Oz and because of Mary Poppins, they were like, we need to put musical numbers in the movie. So the author of the book did not like that choice, and then he didn't want to even like see the film. So they really, just wanted to make something that I think that was entertaining and it was in the spirit of these old like family movie, children's movie classics.
Hmm.
Um and then like I think they auditioned like hundreds of kids, especially for the Charlie character. Um and they intentionally wanted to make it so you didn't know where it was like located or where it took place. And even the time period, they didn't have like cars. They wanted to make it very hard to distinguish the time period. So that kind of stuff I appreciated, like the choice to like go out of their way to do that and make it seem, I think, more fantastical or magical, that you don't really even know like where is this? Is this in the US? Is it in England? Is it Germany? Like
Hmm.
is it somewhere else? Like where is this place? Or is it a film set?
I can't remember. All the kids weren't from the U.S., right? I could have sworn some of the kids were from different countries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um and then the Oompa Loompas, they were also from different countries, and I think a lot of them didn't like even speak English. And apparently, some of the
Mhm.
songs they're like trying to like lip sync with the songs, but they don't really know them because they don't speak English. So that was like an interesting thing to read about too. And the director, Mel Stewart, like looking at the movies, Mel Stewart, the other movies he directed, um, he did a documentary about Watt Stacks, 1973. It was like an African American Woodstock concert held in L.A. 7 years after the Watts riots.
Okay.
So he filmed a documentary of the concert, and that came out in '73. So just 2 years after Willy Wonka. And then he also directed this documentary about a teacher who teaches Shakespeare
Hmm.
called the Hobart Shakespeareans. That was 2005. This guy taught fifth grade children whose parents don't speak English at a school in a Latino Asian neighborhood in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And
So
go
is
ahead.
Willy Wonka his biggest film?
Yeah, it's definitely like his most famous movie. Um, but yeah, like it's kind of interesting. And the fact that like Quaker Oats was trying to like develop some candy products, so they put up a lot of the funding for the movie. So the movie was like kind of like this, not quite a Hollywood movie when it started.
Hmm.
And through the Quaker Oats funding, they were able to like kind of creatively experiment more.
Okay.
So that was like really interesting, like reading about that and the choice to make it a musical. And Gene Wilder only wanted to be in the film if he could in the beginning when he's introduced in the movie, how he pretends like he's disabled and then he does like a somersault. He
Hmm.
only wanted to do the film if he could do that like scene. And he's like, if I can't do that scene, then I don't want to be in the movie.
Uh, that's funny.
Because he felt like that scene demonstrated that you would never know if he's telling the truth or if he's lying.
Hmm.
And he's always kind of like he's hard to read. He's almost like you know, you have to just kind of go along with him for the ride. You don't really know what's going to be true or if he's being like sarcastic. So I like the fact that he stipulated I'll only be in the movie if I can do this scene this way. Like when we first see Willy Wonka's character, it has to be like this. And he described it to them, and they were like, okay.
That's interesting. I mean, people say that also this is like one of Gene Wilder's greatest characters that he's portrayed, um, which I have to like think back in some of his movies because most of the ones I like with him in are kind of like comedy and they feature Richard Pryor. Um, so I can kind of see it kind of like you said, kind of taking on this role where he's playing this character that's kind of got a sense of like unknown about him, but he's very innovative, right? Because he's creating this candy that no one else is creating. Like I said, he's very flamboyant, he's very flashy, he's kind of the center of attention. But by being all this, like you said, he's really hard to read. It almost kind of makes it seem like he has like a dark past or something kind of dark about him, right? That we can't really figure out at the moment, but it will present itself at some point.
Yeah. And I grew up seeing like the some of the Richard Pryor movies he did too, like See No Evil, Hear No
Yeah.
Evil,
Mm-hmm.
Silver Streak, a bunch of them. Yeah. Stir Crazy, I think, was another one.
Yep. Start crazy. Yep.
Um, and the opening credits of the movie, it's interesting. They were filmed at the Toblerone chocolate factory in Switzerland.
Hmm.
The Toblerone brand, which is still a candy brand today, they did it at that factory.
That is really
Um,
interesting.
and I guess to talk about the other versions, I did see the Timothy Chalamet version, and I thought like Chalamet did a good job because he's like supposed to be the younger years of Wonka.
Yeah.
But then the Hugh Grant Oompa Loompa character, I thought that was a bad choice. I thought that was a really, I don't know why they didn't hire, somebody, who would have been like more the height of an Oompa Loompa and like give them some work, like pay them, to be in the movie.
Um, One on the Timothy, I do agree. I think Timothy did a pretty good job. I really feel that the story kind of stood out a little bit more than his performance. I will say that just because I feel like for his character, they tried to kind of relate it more in the sense to kind of Gene Wilder's character, right? Because there is another one which is done by Tim Burton, which is what Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, which is Johnny Depp. Which he doesn't do a bad job. I think he does a really good job. Also, it's just that story is very interesting, and I feel like that's just because of Tim Burton, how Tim Burton does his films. They're always kind of like kooky, crazy, um, and Johnny Depp was just really like weird. But I mean, yeah, like I said, I did like Timothy. I do agree with the Oompa Loompa choice. I feel like maybe because of the original, and how they were, they wanted to kind of present a more right family friendly Oompa Loompa. I can't really remember the Oompa Loompas and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I feel like they were like little mad scientists for some reason. They had like lab coats and weird like classes. So if I can like remember on that one, so they weren't even like very Oompa Loompish from the original. But the Hugh Grant one was a little weird. I do agree they could have possibly maybe chosen someone right who actually is that size, but we do know in Hollywood they're not good at portraying people. They're just not good at it, right? We say we want one thing and we're telling them, and then they do the opposite. I can kind of gonna get off like thinking of when Sonic came out, and I remember when the original they had the first look of their Sonic, and they got so much backlash. And I can't remember if it was because of like the hair or the eyes or whatever it was. And they went right away and changed it, and it was just like you got to go through that sense of just like backlash to get something, changed or whatever it is. But we know Hollywood is usually going to go with their casting and think what's right for them, knowing that sometimes it isn't. So I do agree with you on that. Definitely could have chose a better choice, and definitely could have had more Oompa Loompas, but it was the prelude to the story. So I mean, it makes sense not to have all these Oompa Loompas, and at the end, I believe they go back to the island and get more Oompa Loompas and take them to like the castle, which is going to become the chocolate factory. So
Yeah. Um, I could not honestly get through the Tim Burton version. I mean, I think it was all the special effects and just
yeah, it's
the way Johnny Depp looked. I couldn't even give it a try. I just gave up on it pretty quick after starting it.
I'm trying to think of when that one came out. Like I feel
It
like it
was
was late
2005.
2005. Okay, yeah. So definitely, right. You've got like a lot of already building the CGI. You're gonna try to take it um, to me to the extreme of, like you said, using different effects and stuff like that, just because you know you can. Which I think for some people do really like CGI. I have a friend, um, including myself, like you asked earlier, Jeff, about the 100 films you have on your list, and we talked, and I can only name a couple of them, and told you I've only seen some of them. So I guess I can say it myself, like I think me personally, I have a sense of how far will I go back to watch a movie. Usually the 70s is kind of in my intake because things are still right there in color. And I've seen black and white films. It's really hard sometimes to watch depending on what it is. Um, but I had a friend who doesn't want to watch Star Wars because like we talked about, has all these props and um, um, that aren't, CGI. Like these are real props they're using here on set. And for some people, when they watch that, right, you can say it just doesn't look real enough, or whatever it is that you're looking at that you're just like, I can't believe in this, or it's hard to watch. With some people saying CGI is like, man, this looks fake because you're overdoing it. You're doing too much to it to try to make it seem like it's so real and it really isn't. Um, so I think just to compare, like the original to me compared to that the Johnny Depp, which I'm not saying the Johnny Depp one is bad. I would rather watch the original film with Gene Wilder. It feels like it just has more substance, and more of just a real connection, like you said, of some of the things that are going on in the film that you can possibly connect to, from it being a kid who was poor and struggled and didn't have anything and wasn't seen by everybody by this social status, or to like people who are some of these kids who are rich and greedy and have the resources to buy multiple Willy Wonka bars to find the golden ticket. So yeah, it's just very interesting, like you said. So I do want to ask you though. Speaking
Yeah.
of candy, I know Nestle was the one who started the whole like Wonka brand candy. Did you have any favorites growing up? Like after watching the film, it's like, well, Wonka candy. You have really Wonka candy. Did you have any that you liked? Um,
I remember those Cadbury eggs. I like those.
okay.
And Baby Ruth, Butterfinger, Milky Way. I don't think I ever like bought like the actual Wonka bars. I remember like seeing them in
Uh,
some stores, but I don't think I ever like bought one of those, but definitely like enjoyed candy as a kid. Twizzlers, um, Snickers, Milky Way, definitely. Oh goodness. Um, I'm lucky I don't have more cavities, probably.
Okay, I want to touch on the candy. So, like I said, you connect to different things and watching that movie and seeing. So when I saw that there was actually like Willy Wonka candy, I was as a kid, like growing up, like, oh man, I got to get my hand on this stuff, because it's like you start to kind of believe, like when we talk about that imagination you have as a kid, kind of like going through the process, like, man, just imagine if they're really making this candy like this and how it tastes. And I wonder what the taste, what it tastes like. So I would say I did like the Wonka Nerds when they came out, like Nerds. Laffy Taffy was really good.
Oh yeah.
Um, and then like the sweet tarts was really good. I can think of like the top candy that they like made that was supposed to be like Wonka related. And then I would say I don't think I think I was in my 20s, man. I'm not gonna lie. When I came across the Willy Wonka bar, because I feel like they weren't something that was real or they were hard to come across or buy. And I think it was because something was going on related to like, so they were like releasing the candy bars. And I had finally got one out to say, man, it was not what I thought it would be. I didn't personally like it. I remember it's because it was like chocolate mixed with like supposedly have to have like this graham cracker in it and some other things. And for me, it was disappointing. It was just like this whole bar is so iconic in these films, like what it represents. And to finally get your hand on one, because you've been seeing these kids biting and they're like, oh my God. And it doesn't live up to that. So I would definitely say out of all the Wonka candies, the Wonka bar is not the best, which they need to fix that because yeah, I don't know how that's possible or how that turns out, but yeah. So if you haven't got one, Jeff, trust me, you're not missing
But I think even on the set, a lot of the candy wasn't real.
out. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's part of the movie magic and the way your imagination, you think like in the movie and the scenes, it makes it look really delicious or desirable, and then in real life, it's like it's hard to match what you imagine in your mind.
Mm-hmm. It's true. So are we gonna so this is talking about family friendly movies. Um and I guess I'll answer and ask the question, do you believe this film is family friendly, I guess? I mean, I know it got the PG rating or whatnot, and I guess you could say it can be debated. Um, like in my sense, I think it's personally more for preteens and teenagers. Right? If I had kids, I'm gonna say probably my kid who's maybe in the fifth, sixth grade to older. I don't think it's really for kids who are 5 to 9, from that like kindergarten maybe to like third, fourth grade. I think they're gonna get nightmares if they do watch this movie. Some kids, not all kids. It's definitely different, and a lot of kids now today they're man watching anything and like everything too. But some kids do still have that fear of a lot of stuff. And I know personally working with kids, a lot of them are still scared of watching scary movies or don't watch scary movies or could be watching something with some action in it and maybe the loud sound of the boom frightens them or whatever it could be, or just the presentation of maybe a character looking weird or whatever it is. Um, so do you think this film is family friendly or
I
um,
think, I mean, it's technically rated G, but I would say it's more PG.
okay?
Um, I mean, in the tunnel scene, there is like a flash image of like a chicken getting decapitated. It's like very fast, but it's in there. Like some people might, or some young people might catch that. Um, there's a lot of like scenes of peril or situations that are frightening. Um, there's a lot of like the way that the four kids act. They're not exactly like good role models. They're not really
Oh
behaving in ways where you're like, yeah, that's really a mature way to behave or a way to treat other people. I know some of the behind the scenes stuff, like when some of the scenes the kids are so mean during the when the cameras weren't rolling, they were like apologizing to each other because they felt bad they were being so mean to each other
yeah.
on the set for the
Hmm.
script.
Hmm.
So I agree with you. I think it's like more of a PG, maybe PG-13, depending on the kid. Because that whole tunnel scene is the main sequence that is like frightening, kind of scary. You're not really sure
What's going to
like
happen?
what's going on. It's like, it's dark. There's all these things flashing. He's like singing these weird kind of creepy songs. And it's just going faster and faster. It's getting more intense. Um, but I think like overall, like it's something that families can watch like together if the
Hmm.
young kids are old enough to like not be afraid and they get like the make believe fantasy part. I
Hmm.
like how it's not. I included on the list because there's really no overt violence or you know there's no like fights necessarily or like gun battles or sword fighting. Um, there's some implied. It gets kind of interesting because like some of the kids do disappear. You're not sure where
I
like they
mean,
live if they drown in the chocolate pool
I
or
think that's the biggest thing. I think as watching the film as a kid, for me, for sure, was like going back, like, hey, yeah, well, Augustus was a kid who fell into the chalk and then got sucked up, and it's like, okay, where did he go after he got sucked up? And was he okay after he hit the chocolate? You had Violet, who I think ate the blueberry gum or whatever, and then she swells up, and the way she swells up is kind of like, good lord, that's crazy. And then how she's gonna unswell, she's got to pop some way somehow. You got Mike who got strung into like the candy sized bar or whatnot, which was crazy. So, and it's like, I like, that's what, like all these things happening to these kids. I think for Kua, whatever, she falls down the garbage chute. And it's like, man, and like even Charlie and Grandpa Joe, right? They drink the fizzy soda and then they start to float up to a fan. That's like that right there. That's probably like the most I think scary is right there is like, oh my gosh, because that fan, there's only one thing that can happen. And lucky it doesn't happen, but it's like, okay, that's a bit scary right there.
and they're crying out for
Um,
help too during that
yeah,
scene.
they are. Yes, they are. Yes. So I think those things watching as a kid, it could freak you out a little bit, just a tad bit. But like you said, everything else besides that, it's cool. It's joyful. It's you know, um, so for me, I think that's the only thing I would be a little bit frightened from some of that stuff. I would say I probably would have nightmares, but right there live, like just the thought, like what is happening to these kids? And like you said, where do these kids all go? Because after that, they have the little thing where Wonka finds out Charlie and Grandpa Joe drunk the soda, and he's kind of in that disappointment and tell them they don't win the competition, and they threaten to take on one of the candies to one of the spies or whatnot, and then Charlie says he's not going to end up doing it, and then just that like test of morality of showing, I'm still a good kid. I'm humbled. I've kind of learned my lesson of what I did. Um, but just ultimately, it's just yeah, it's just like man, where all these kids go? Like Charlie, you went, you're not worried about these kids. None of us like did they survive? Like you said, like are they gonna be okay? Are they trapped in the chocolate factory forever? Like, well, we do get like you get the happy ending, which is right. A lot of these movies, and then you have so many questions. Like, man, I do wonder what happened to life. I do wonder what happened to all these kids. These kids also learn their lessons too because everything they did was because you weren't following the rules that were given to you at basically kind of the beginning, though, not to really touch, not to like eat these certain things unless I kind of tell you to. And you guys all kind of felt that. And yeah, what happened?
I mean, I think the uniqueness and the creative style, um, that kind of contributes to the spectacle of the whole thing. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's where it's like, well, this is like a fantasy film, it's a musical, there's these like kind of, it's not like a everyday realistic kind of a story. Once they go in the factory, it's like this magical place, and um the colors, the costumes, and all the like production design elements, it like really, it kind of seduces you, like pulls you in, and you're just like, whoa, like what is this world? It's like a
Mm-hmm.
kind of a fantasy dream-like kind of world. um
Um,
what were you going to say? Go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna say. So after like kind of seeing that, maybe as a kid or as an adult, do you ever think? I mean, we both weren't born. Well, I wasn't born in the '70s. I know
I wasn't.
you weren't born in the '70s, so um, would you would have thought possibly of them, making a sequel and possibly having the same success? I know they do have like I think it was thought of having a sequel. I don't think they went through it, and then they also, made Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which I don't even know if that is supposed to be their sequel, whatever. And then the Prelude. Do you think that if they would have made a sequel, it would have had the same success? And do you think people would have wanted to see it?
I feel like the 1971 version is so unique and original, it would have been hard for them to top that. And they would have needed like a bigger budget if they did it, a couple years later, still in the 70s. Um, and I feel like they would have been more like self-conscious of the world from the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I think on one hand, it's good they didn't make another film back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I probably Gene Wilder would have wanted like more money, to be the
No,
star
most likely.
again. I mean, then there probably would have been like other cameos of like famous actors and actresses. So I think the creative, vision, they would have had to balance like all these different layers and personalities or egos too. It probably would have been really hard to like get it off the ground. I think they tried, but the author of the book, um, of the original book, he definitely didn't want them to do any sequels. And on the flip side, I think the Johnny Depp 2005 version, that is supposed to be closer to the book story.
Okay.
It's supposed to be a closer adaptation, whereas the 1971 version is really, they're using the concept and the main like characters, but they made it a musical. They wrote, other dialogue. I know that the villain, the spy character, that was not in the book. They created that villain character for the film, for the screenplay, because they felt like they needed like a villain and just gave that character more screen time. So yeah, it seems like a really unique situation with the 1971 version to like, I feel like I could tell they were able to like experiment in a way creatively.
Mm-hmm.
And they had like Wizard of Oz in the back of their mind and Mary Poppins, but then they were like, we're going to still do our own thing and make something really fantastical and wild. And I mean, it does have an edge too. You could say it's edgy. So, and then the Chalamet version, the recent version, I think it kind of played it safe for a lot of things in the story. And it made it a musical again. Um, but it's in some ways it's not as like fantastical, and it never really gets too dark. You know, like
No.
it's pretty it's pretty safe, I think, in a lot of the story points and plot points.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I was just curious. I mean, I think of some films way back. You know, they had the Wizard of Oz. I know they did the Return of Oz. Um,
Yeah.
I never watched that, but
That one's darker. That one's darker.
and then you know they have the Wiz,
Yeah.
which isn't a sequel, but it's uh, rehabilitation or whatnot. And then um, yeah, so I was just curious. I wouldn't see them making a sequel. I know they talked about it. And then the newer one, I can see it opening up for a sequel, possibly,
Yeah.
but I really don't know.
I think they'll probably try to do another either a sequel or some kind of a follow up to the Chalamet version. It seems like it probably made enough money, for them to justify making another film.
Okay. Um,
So yeah, like if you had kids of your own or if you're younger relatives, what would you want to show them from movies?
I would show them everything, man. I think that's probably the problem now. What's going on with the different generations? Um, right. Like I said, like me personally, I have a hard time with black and white films. But if I do feel like there's a black and white film you should see, I'm definitely going to show it. So for me, I'm going to show my kids like the classic we talked about. Wizard, they should see Wizard of Oz. Willy Wonka. They should see that. You know, The Wiz. They should see that. Who knows when they get over? I might show them Chaplin. It's showing some silent films. They definitely should see that. You don't have to watch all the silent films. You don't have to watch all the problems, but definitely show some of the comic ones and the good ones. And then, like I said, showing them Star Wars, um, Indiana Jones, um, you know, classics like that. And then kind of going more in my generation, like I said, it was just that animation time, showing them all the different animations um, from all the Disney classics and other production classics or whatnot from DreamWorks and all of those. So I think there's, you know, really no limit. You know, depending on what the rating is, I'm not going to show them anything rated R or PG-13 if I feel like they're not ready for that yet. But I think that's just the biggest thing, man. Like the problem today, kids aren't watching things, you know, back in the 70s or back in the 80s or back in the early 90s in my era. Like I feel like these kids, you know, you show them something and they're looking, and like I said earlier, like you just get this big, oh man, that's really cringe. This is cringe. Uh, you know, what is this? And they take everything now so like literal. You can show them something like the other day, we were watching SpongeBob, and they're so critical of everything. And it's like you said, not using your imagination really. Like everything's like, oh man, well, how are they underwater? They're talking this and that. And it's like it's a cartoon, guys. Like you're over analyzing it, and then you're taking the fun away, right? When you're taking it too serious. That's why when I try to watch films, like you said, because you kind of got to use your imagination for some of these films, because some of them are in the fantasy world, some of them are not. Um, you know, this is fiction. It's not fiction unless it's a biography or telling a story of some true events, right? Then most of the time you got to use your imagination to have fun or to see things you really wouldn't notice. So yeah, I feel like today you have to show these kids, and I'm gonna have to show the kids of this history too, because this some of these films are historical. They are um, important in cinema culture. So it's almost like you kind of have to show some of these films, right? Even the ones that aren't PG and PG-13. These films have to be showed. So um, I think it's good for these kids to see it. And I personally, like I said, I would show my kids a lot of films because I like watching them. I like watching movies. And I think that parents need to start kind of doing this too, just showing your kids something you watch. Like this is what I watched when I was a kid. Even just to have that, like you said, that family connection of just doing something. We're sitting here, we're watching a movie, we're having family time. You're also learning something, back in this time. You're also learning something about me that has this connection to this movie and why I connect to this movie and why I like this movie so much. And maybe I watched this movie with my parents, so now I'm showing you this film, and I feel like kids, they kind of just don't get that anymore because, like I said, I'm about to bring it up because it's cringe. It's not good, or oh my gosh, I can't believe we're watching this. Like, do you believe this? And it's like I said, you're not using your imagination to have fun of what's going on. And I think a lot of kids are missing out because, man, I've been not even kids, people who are in their 20s, 22, 25. Name something. I haven't. What? No, I haven't watched that. What? Now I do the same too. I can say I'm 32, and I'm pretty sure someone asked me, "You seen this?" I probably like, no, I probably what? You haven't watched that? Okay, I'm gonna have to get to it, But when people tell me they haven't seen classics, like they haven't watched Star Wars and they haven't saw this film, I'm kind of just like looking at them like, dude, like even if you don't like it, watch it. You still gotta watch it. Because it's something that I like. I always think people who are in that time who seen Willy Wonka in the '70s and how they felt and connected with the film, right? 'Cause we didn't get that opportunity. We got an opportunity to watch it, but not during that specific time. Like when Jaws was made, right? I think about when I think about scary movies just in the older times. Like when I first saw Jaws, I was scared as a kid. Um, and now when I kind of watch it, I'm kind of like, okay, man, this definitely frightened me as a kid, but I know it frightened adults too. Now I don't get that feel just because of, like you say, you watch certain movies and you can kind of just realize from the animatronics of just using like the shark they use or whatever it is. It's like okay, like kind of scary. It's not really scary anymore now, but yeah, I just feel like I got to show my kids everything, and it should just be a thing people are doing. Not with just movies, music, art, just history in general. Like I think we're getting to a point where we're seeing these gaps we talk about. People don't, you talk about something, people are looking at you like, huh, or who is this person? Or you're learning about someone, and they're just like, man, I never knew this. Yeah, we know.
Do you think, as an educator these days, are kids, are they still excited to learn, or do you have to really, explain it or convince them, like, come on, you're going to learn some stuff? Like,
Okay, so I'm gonna try to answer this. I've been on all three different. Um, let's start with the high school in a sense. Like I think those kids are at a point where they're learning, but I feel like they also want to teach, right? Because they've seen so much, and a lot of things. They're getting a lot of new information and have to process a lot of things. I think way quickly than we probably did. Just because we have like the internet and stuff like that. So um, the middle school kids, I don't know. Middle school is a weird time. I think working there and seeing that and looking back when I look back at myself, just like reflecting back on just like on the movie, like as a middle schooler, I showed some cheeky behavior. I would say, just like some of the kids in the movie, I probably would have definitely touched something in middle school I didn't have any business touching or not, like following the rules. So I think it's more of those kids are trying to figure out who they are. I definitely see a lot of kids who want to learn, but I definitely see a lot of kids who are just out there, right? They're just kind of there in the moment and haven't figured it out yet. I would say, man, mostly like elementary kids. I think, right, your brain's really developing at that time. It's developing at all times. This is where you're getting all that critical information to really take in and process. And that's why I think they're starting teaching these kids about restorative justice and all different other things at a younger age because it's going to be better for them, right, to take it all in and get a better understanding. So when they get to these, you get to middle school, you get into the high school, you don't have this gap of information I think some of these kids are missing. They do have some kids you look at might have a gap or something that they're missing and they're not. Maybe just because they didn't get it at that time, or maybe they just didn't care at that time. So I think it's just um, I guess we could say a split of I do see it and I don't see it.
And you brought up music. I think that's an interesting art form that maybe young people connect more to music than movies these days. If you were to play them like music from the 70s versus showing them movies from the 70s.
Okay, so another story. I was in a class in high school, in a history class, and music came up because of the time of the era we were talking about. I'm talking about certain people, and then the teacher brought up some other people, and one name she said was Bob Marley. Now it was kind of crickets in the classroom, and the kids, I do believe, know who Bob Marley is. I think that's them listen to Bob Marley, but I do think there's a handful that don't. Now, I use the high school reference because these kids, like I said, right, are at a point where you say things, you might feel that they might know it, and then sometimes they don't. Like we also brought up some films, some classic films that were brought up too, and was asked the question how many kids saw, and maybe three or four kids had rose in their hand, and it was like, okay, so you kids aren't really watching these movies for whatever reason. Like you said, it may be that you just don't have anybody in your household who wants to show you this film, um, or it's probably just too old for you. Like I said, like we all have a cutoff somewhere to where it's like, I don't think I can do that. So most of these kids in high school, I would suspect never to watch a black and white film set. I would suspect most of them seen Wizard of Oz and seen Willy Wonka for sure. But I could throw out some other films they probably haven't watched either, right? So
Also, I wonder too if it's also a matter of like some of the music or even the movies, are they only going to pay attention to it if it's like super famous or somebody posts something about it on social media, like a clip from it, and then now they might be curious to check it out on their own? Is that the case too, you think?
probably, I mean, I put it like this: I got this shirt on right now, right? It's got music artists on it, and I'll tell you now, I know everybody on this shirt. Now, knowing everybody is one thing. I've heard of Billie Holiday songs before, but I have not listened to Billie Holiday's music. I've listened to a lot of Aretha, I've listened to a lot of Mary J, and I've listened to a lot of Lauren Hill, right? So I can also ask the kids that too. Have you listened to any of these artists? Maybe so. Um, I do think, like you're saying, like just having the internet and being exposed, right? You might come across some of these artists in a different way. From it being from Instagram or someone recommending a song to you or hearing it from a game, right? Because there are games now. You play a game, they have like soundtracks with these different artists. That's how I sometimes pick up music from different athletes, right? You might hear it in a film and like, oh man, I really like this song. I've never heard it before. Um, but I would believe that these kids are hopefully finding in these different avenues. But then again, it's too what are you looking up? What is in your feed? So
Yeah.
um, I don't know, man. I feel like I said, they know of this. It's just of how much do they care? How much do you care of Bob Marley? Right? Because Bob Marley is bigger than music. That's what I think it is. There's some of these artists who are bigger than what they are and what they in, right? Like Bob Marley's bigger than music. There's artists who are like that, who bigger than music because they've done something more than just music
Yeah.
or just in film or whatever it is. So like, you know, and then you do have kids who have that which I felt kind of at a younger age, right? Where it's like, this is my parents' stuff. This is what my parents like. This is my parents' music. And it's like, okay, I get that. But it doesn't mean this music can't grow on either. It doesn't mean that you might not like this either. I'll use this as just a quick story. Uh, Growing up, my mom loved, like my parents loved KBLX, Quiet Storm, used to call it. Played a lot of like R&B, soul, and jazz. And my mom and my dad they listen to other stations, but they love that. There was a lot of music in the early 70s and 80s, and some in the 60s, but mostly the 70s and 80s and 90s. So, like, 90s, you're probably going to gravitate to. I'm a 90s baby. But things like in the 80s and 70s, right? Like, I hear a song just said, and you're like, okay, but it's jamming. My parents love it, and then you kind of listen to it. And after a while, it's like some of these songs start growing. It's like, man, I like these songs too. They're actually really good songs. Like passage just being my parents' music. Like I get the understanding of what they're talking about, what they're saying, what's the message behind the music. This beat is really catchy. This is a good song. And I think we sometimes forget that too of, just kind of after a while forming your own opinion or letting it come to you and just kind of like, okay, I like this. And it has nothing to really, like parents did introduce me, but like this is my own opinion on it. I like it for myself. So yeah.
I remember when I was still working in special education when that movie Guardians of the Galaxy came out, the
Mm-hmm.
first one. I remember there was a student that loved the soundtrack. And the soundtrack has a lot of 70s music, 80s music, a lot of those now they're like classics of those decades.
Yep.
But that was the only reason why the student liked the music because it was from the soundtrack.
And it was a great. And what's crazy? Guardians of the Galaxy had a great. All the crazy part. All three films had great soundtracks. And like you said, it's all music in that time from the 80s and I like classic hits. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and none of these songs are new. These aren't new songs they're playing in a movie. They're old songs they're playing. So kind of like, all right. So if you like them, it's like, see,
And it
there's
reminds
no
me it reminds me too, like some students will wear like Nirvana t-shirts or other bands, and I'd be like, "What's your favorite album by that band?" They're like, "I don't know, I just like the shirt." Like,
shirt. And that's the problem. That's what I'm saying. Like, and there it goes, right? Like that became very popular in like the mid 2000s, maybe the early. It's like, man, everybody's got a narrative on it. Guns N' Roses. I like, I have a Prince shirt. That's got like the Purple Rain on it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you start seeing, and you ask people like, that's why I never bought one of those shirts because I started seeing people kind of slip up with that, and it's like, man, you get asked that question. Now look at you, you're like, man, you know that one song they got? No, I don't know that one song. Why do you have a T-shirt on? Because it looks cool. Like, come on, man.
you seen
Oh,
Cinderella? The Cinderella with Whitney Houston and
yes, I have,
Brandy?
bro. That was a good one. I ain't gonna lie. I ain't gonna lie. I liked it that one growing up for sure. That was. I like that film. I don't know if we should talk about it, but I will say this one thing on that film. I will before we get out of here. Why I enjoyed it so much was because of the crazy, and I said crazy, crazy diversity in that. Right?
Yeah.
You had black mom. Dad was what? He was white. Ended up being like a Filipino Asian kid. Like it was just like wow, and it all worked. That's even like the best part. It was like you would think at first you do kind of like this is very interesting, but after the movie kind of flows, it's like man, this is really cool though because it's like we've never seen this kind of type of diversity
Yeah. And that
ever,
was made in the
and
90s, like late 90s.
yeah, made in the '90s. So and Whitney Houston got some good numbers in there. right?
Yeah.
You find a person who can sing. That's what you got to do. So Hollywood, if you're listening, make sure you get someone who can actually sing. Because if not, you're gonna be looking like a Little Mermaid, bro. Who I was telling Jeff that it wasn't it. He was screaming. It wasn't it. Well, Jeff,
All right.
it was great. You have a good one, my friend,
All right, man. Good
and
night.
hopefully we can do this again. All right,
I'll see you soon.
all right.
All right, peace.
Peace.